You step into your garden in the middle of June, under the blazing summer sun. The cucumber vines have completely covered the trellis. The leaves are lush and green, and the vines stretch in every direction. At first glance, everything looks perfectly healthy. But when you bend down for a closer look, you find only a few small cucumbers. Many of the lower leaves have already begun to turn yellow. Inside the dense canopy, the air is damp and stagnant, and the first signs of disease begin to appear. You water more often. You try all kinds of disease control products, but the plants keep producing more leaves than fruit, and the harvest gets smaller and smaller. Yet on Amish farms, the story is completely different. Do you know why family farms in Ohio and Pennsylvania consistently harvest huge amounts of cucumbers without relying on chemical pesticides? According to sustainable agriculture research in the United States, the secret lies in how carefully they manage their vines with regular pruning. The Amish community has many practical gardening techniques, and today I'll be sharing some of them with you. The first tip is to remove all flowers and side shoots from the first 5 to 7 nodes of the cucumber plant. This is a technique that many first-time cucumber growers are reluctant to follow because it goes against common instinct. You spend weeks caring for the plant, waiting for each new leaf to appear. Then, when the first flowers finally bloom, the last thing you want to do is cut them off with a pair of pruning shears. It sounds wasteful, but the Amish have been doing it for generations. They are not trying to harvest the very first cucumbers. They want to harvest more cucumbers throughout the entire season. The reason lies in the plant's stage of development. When a cucumber plant is still young, most of its energy is being used to build a strong root system, thicken the main stem, and develop enough healthy leaves to support future harvests. If the plant has to support flowers and fruit too early, its energy is diverted into reproduction before its foundation is fully established. You may harvest a few cucumbers sooner, but in return, the plant often grows more slowly, produces fewer strong branches, and loses vigor when the hottest part of summer arrives. That is exactly what the Amish try to avoid. Instead of allowing the plant to bear fruit immediately, they intentionally delay that stage for a short period. This gives the roots time to grow deeper, the main stem to become stronger, and the entire plant to improve its ability to absorb water and nutrients. By the time fruit production begins, the plant is strong enough to support many cucumbers at once without becoming exhausted. The method itself is very simple. When the plant has developed about 5 to 7 leaf nodes, use clean pruning shears to remove all flowers, tiny fruits, and side shoots growing in that section. Leave only the main stem and healthy leaves so the plant can continue photosynthesizing. Once the main stem has grown past those lower nodes and is climbing steadily up the trellis, you can allow it to flower and produce fruit normally. This is another point that many people misunderstand. They think removing flowers will reduce the harvest. In reality, you are sacrificing a few early cucumbers in exchange for a much longer and more productive harvest season. The Amish often say that a young plant should not be expected to do the work of a mature one. If you give the plant enough time to develop properly at the beginning, it will reward you with stronger vines, more female flowers, and a steady harvest that lasts until the end of the season. The second tip is to remove the older leaves at the base of the cucumber plant. This is a very simple task, but it is also one that many gardeners tend to put off. They see that the leaves are still green. They assume that keeping them will allow the plant to photosynthesize more, The Amish look at it differently. They do not judge a leaf only by its color. They ask whether that leaf is still contributing to the health of the entire plant. As cucumber plants enter their vigorous growth stage, the canopy becomes thicker and denser. The upper leaves gradually shade the lower part of the plant, leaving the older leaves near the base with little or no direct sunlight. At that point, those lower leaves are no longer photosynthesizing efficiently, yet they still consume water. They still use nutrients, and they still occupy valuable space beneath the trellis. That is why the Amish remove them, not because the leaves are damaged, but because they have already served their purpose. Once they are removed, sunlight can reach deeper into the canopy. Air also circulates more freely. Watering, fertilizing, and checking the fruit become much easier as well. It is a small change, but if you have ever walked into a properly pruned cucumber trellis, you will notice the difference immediately. The space beneath the vines always feels open and airy. Every vine has room to grow, and you can easily see each cucumber instead of lifting layer after layer of leaves to find them. The method is very simple. Once the plant is climbing steadily on the trellis, examine the lower part of the stem. Older leaves close to the ground, leaves that are completely shaded, or leaves that have already started turning yellow. All of these can be removed with a clean pair of pruning shears. But there is one important thing to remember. Do not remove too many leaves at once. Only prune a few older leaves each time so the plant has enough time to adjust and continue photosynthesizing normally. The Amish often say, a good cucumber trellis is not the one with the most leaves. It is the one where every leaf receives sunlight and still makes a meaningful contribution to the plant's growth. Sometimes, by removing just a few leaves that have already done their job, you create plenty of space for the entire cucumber plant to thrive in the weeks ahead. The third tip is to pinch off the growing tip once the cucumber vine reaches the top of the trellis. This is the point where many gardeners choose to do nothing. They simply let the vine keep climbing. Then it continues spreading sideways. It wraps around neighboring vines. Sometimes it even grows into nearby plants. At first, the trellis looks even greener and fuller. But the Amish rarely allow that to happen. They understand that a cucumber plant cannot fully focus on two directions of growth at the same time. It can either continue extending its main vine, or concentrate on producing flowers and fruit. As long as the growing tip keeps extending upward, the plant continues prioritizing new leaf nodes. Every new node requires more water, more nutrients, and more energy to support its growth. That means the developing cucumbers receive a smaller share of those resources. That is why the Amish always pay close attention to the height of the trellis. Once the main vine reaches the top, or the desired height, they pinch off the growing tip. Not to stop the plant from growing, but to redirect the way it grows. Once the growing tip is removed, the plant slows the extension of the main vine and begins directing more energy into its side branches. These side branches are where most female flowers and future waves of cucumbers are produced throughout the season. You may not see the plant getting taller, but you will see it producing more cucumbers. That is also why Amish cucumber trellises always look neat and organized. There are no vines stretching several feet beyond the trellis. Every vine stays within easy reach for watering, pruning, and harvesting. The method is very simple. When the main vine reaches the top of the trellis, use clean pruning shears to remove the growing tip about 1 to 2 centimeters above the last leaf node. There's no need to cut deeply. Simply remove the growing point at the end of the vine. After about a week, you will notice the side branches becoming much more vigorous, and the number of flowers will begin to increase. But there is one important point I want to emphasize. Do not pinch the growing tip too early. If the plant is still short, the main stem is still weak, or it has not yet covered the trellis, pinching it at that stage will only force the plant to spend extra time recovering. The Amish perform this technique only when the plant is truly ready. They often say, a good cucumber trellis is not the tallest one. It is the one that knows when to stop growing upward. Because once the plant no longer spends its energy reaching higher, it can devote far more of its strength to what every gardener wants most: new flushes of flowers and continuous harvests that last until the end of the season. The fourth tip is to remove weak side branches, or those that are no longer capable of producing fruit. This is a technique that many gardeners almost never use. They assume that the more branches a plant has, the more cucumbers it will produce. The Amish see it differently. They understand that every branch on the plant requires water. Every branch needs nutrients, and every branch consumes energy simply to stay alive. If a branch keeps producing leaves but very few flowers, or if it has stopped flowering for a long time, then it is using nutrients that could be put to better use by healthier, more productive branches. That is why the Amish do not allow cucumber vines to grow unchecked throughout the season. They spend a few minutes each week inspecting every vine, not to remove as many branches as possible, but to identify the ones that no longer contribute to the harvest. These may be very weak branches crowded in the middle of the canopy, or slow-growing branches that remain shaded by stronger vines and receive almost no sunlight. Once these branches are removed, the plant no longer wastes water and nutrients supporting them. Instead, those resources are redirected to the branches carrying flowers and developing fruit. You may not notice the difference overnight, but after 1 or 2 weeks, the remaining branches usually grow more evenly. The cucumbers develop faster, and the fruit size becomes more consistent from one harvest to the next. The method is very simple. Once a week, walk along your cucumber trellis and inspect each side branch. If a branch has produced nothing but leaves after several weeks of growth, or is growing too close to a stronger branch, or is buried deep inside the canopy where it no longer receives sunlight, you can prune it off cleanly at its connection to the main stem using a sharp, sanitized pair of pruning shears. Do not snap it off by hand. Torn wounds take longer to heal and can make it easier for diseases to enter the plant. But there is one important point I want to make clear. Do not turn your cucumber plant into nothing more than a bare framework with only a few branches left. The plant still needs enough healthy leaves and productive branches to photosynthesize and maintain its yield. The Amish do not prune based on numbers. They prune with a purpose. Every cut is intended to give the healthiest parts of the plant more space and more nutrients to grow. They often say, a good gardener is not the one who keeps the most branches. It is the one who knows what the plant no longer needs. Sometimes, removing just one weak branch helps the entire cucumber plant use its nutrients more efficiently for the rest of the growing season. The fifth tip is to remove unnecessary tendrils. This is a part of the cucumber plant that many gardeners never even think about. They see the tendrils gripping the trellis tightly and assume that the more tendrils the plant has, the healthier it must be. so they simply let them grow naturally throughout the season. The Amish take a different approach. They understand that a tendril has only one purpose: to help the vine attach itself to the trellis. Once the plant has been securely tied and the main stem is stable, not every tendril is still necessary. Many tendrils begin wrapping around neighboring branches. They coil around leaf stems. Some even pull clusters of cucumbers tightly together. As the plant continues to grow, the vines become tangled, the canopy grows crowded, and routine maintenance becomes much more difficult. That is why the Amish do not simply let the tendrils grow unchecked. Each week, while walking along the cucumber trellis, they spend a few minutes inspecting the tendrils. If a tendril is attached properly to the trellis and helping support the main stem, they leave it alone. But if it is wrapped around another branch, pulling two vines together or crowding the leaves and fruit, they remove it immediately. The purpose is not to make the plant grow faster. It is to keep the cucumber trellis neat and well organized. When the vines are arranged properly, sunlight is distributed more evenly, watering becomes easier, and checking for pests and diseases takes much less effort. When harvest season arrives, you also will not have to spend time untangling vines just to find a cucumber hidden behind the foliage. The method is very simple. Use a clean pair of pruning shears. Cut the tendril off close to its base if it is causing problems. There is no need to remove every tendril. Keep only the ones that are actually helping support the plant on the trellis. Tendrils do not produce flowers. They do not produce cucumbers. Leaving too many tendrils on the plant does not mean you will harvest more cucumbers. The Amish often say that a good cucumber trellis is not the one with the most tendrils. It is the one where every vine has enough room to grow. Sometimes, just a few careful cuts in the right places are enough to make the entire trellis more open, easier to manage, and productive all the way through the end of the growing season. All 5 tips you've seen today are simple. They don't require special equipment, and they don't cost much to put into practice. All you need is a clean pair of pruning shears and a few minutes of careful observation each week. Those small habits are exactly what have helped many Amish gardens maintain consistent harvests for generations. If you're growing cucumbers, try applying one tip at a time instead of changing everything all at once. Watch how your plants respond. You'll soon understand why these simple techniques have been preserved by the Amish to this day. And if you have an effective cucumber pruning tip of your own, share it in the comments so everyone can learn from your experience.